Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Free Speech podcast. It is barely believable that we made it this far, and it's me, Niall, dragging along behind me, the Lady of the East, the Dame of Transylvania. It is Christina. How the heck are you this week, Christina?
I am sleep deprived and hungover, but other than that, I'm fine.
What the hell did you do to yourself?
Well, I'm trying to kill myself before I'm 30, No, I couldn't sleep yesterday, at all. And, the night leading up to yesterday. And then yesterday I drank, me and my partner in crime shared more than half a bottle of whiskey between the two of us. So
my only concern is that may not be enough whiskey in order for you to digest what we have to talk about this week. Religion.
Yeah. Religion.
If I had a magical board in front of me that made scary noises when I said that, I would, because I'm guaranteed we're going to offend everyone except for one little edgy person in the corner who
this is a sensitive topic. So apologies in advance for those who will hate me, but actually I really don't care, so it's okay.
Now, when we talk about religion, we're talking about something that people hold close to them, and it's really tied up with their sense of who they are. And
yes.
So if it feels like we're punching you in the face, we're not. We're punching you in the soul.
Yeah. It's a very intimate topic for those who are religious indeed.
The world can seem held together by religion in some ways. That people are like, I understand the world. I understand what the world is and what life is for and what things are for and stuff. Because of religion, I know my place in the world. But religion is actually only one of 3 things that holds society together, and we have already discussed 2 of them. So this has been a master plan of mine. The first one is you have legitimate authority, in which we talked about monarchy and its evolution into the capitalist elite, the people we think are legitimately in charge and wield their power correctly or illegally or what have you. Number 2 is the system they use to maintain that power. So capitalism based on the labor generating value for the capitalist. That's the system in which power is maintained to serve those who have legitimacy in their power. But both of those are held together by narrative. And religion is the ultimate narrative. Do you think so?
Yes, I do think so. Take even a atheist country like Sweden. We have very few people who are actively religious, but their religious values still underpins the values of society, even if people don't realize it. It's there. It's always there, lurking in the background.
That might be pretty cool to mention. We have very different religious backgrounds, even though we're both from the same religion. You're from a Catholic family. I'm from a Catholic family, but they're differently Catholic.
Yeah, very much so.
So tell me a little bit about the religious vibe in Sweden. You mentioned it was atheistic in nature, but there's still some sort of religious underpinning. What does it mean to be religious in Sweden?
Well, it's rare. It's rare to find people who are actively religious in Sweden. Most people are atheistic or at the very least agnostic. They don't really think about religion. So people who are practicing religion are indeed rare. What does it mean to be religious in Sweden? Well, I think it means that you enjoy going to church once in a while. That's about the extent of religion in Sweden. But again, the values does underpin the values of society, even if people don't realize it.
I am definitely going to ask you more about your strange country and its relationship with religion as we go through this, because I think it will highlight a few things that I've got written here. And to give you my perspective, I'm from Northern Ireland, and religion could not be more important. Our society is divided between Catholic and Protestants, who also happen to be people that believe that the Catholic side tend to want a united Ireland, and the people on the Protestant side tend to desire union with the United Kingdom. But on the other hand, it is still very much a religious conflict, and it dictates your identity, your chances in life, the relative opportunities and the relative respect that you can expect in society in Northern Ireland. Additionally, an awful lot of the older generation are very genuinely religious, church-going, conservative. You get the idea. That is very much changing for my generation, especially since the scandals with the Catholic Church and child molestation and all that stuff. It has definitely shot itself in the foot with the youngers, but still, religion is an active and vital force where I'm from. So keep that in mind. We were both originating in Catholic families, but it seems very different religious worlds from which we originate.
Indeed.
So, give me one of your classic gut feelings. Christina, what the hell is religion?
It's a narrative to control people.
Yeah, it's used as that, but that's not what it is.
Yeah. Well, religion is a lot of things. I think for people who are practicing religion, it's kind of like a reason, a justification for existence in a way. And from that perspective, it's kind of grim. It's like, oh, life sucks, but then there must be some reason. Perhaps there is some God that is testing us. And it's also an expression of kind of like some kind of human drive we have to search for meaning and find guidance and all that.
Yep, that's some relevant points. But you can just tell by the way you've processed that. Religion is hard to define.
It is.
Almost like grabbing dry sand. The more you grip it, the more it slips between your fingers. It's like it doesn't want to be defined. It's almost like blurred edges.
Yeah,
I
think that is the point of religion in a way, isn't it? It is meant to be hard to define. I think that's one of the main main ingredients in religion.
Well, shocker news to you. We only really made up religion 100 years ago. It was only in the last 100 years or so that scholars have attempted to define and cage off something called religion. Before that, it was just a fact of life. It was like air. You never questioned why it was there. It just was there. And the blurred edges were almost seen as a part of the fact that it was part of everything. Religion wasn't something you could separate and put in a box. It was just another dimension to all of the normal stuff you did in life. And you even had this political situation in the past where you had the three estates, where you had those who rule, those who work, and those who pray. They were considered self-evidently part of the world around you. They were never considered something separate or definable or cageable. In fact, if we nerded out a little bit and head back to Roman times, where I like to spend far too much of my spare time, we find we have the word religio. Can you guess what they meant by that?
No, I can't. I have so many guesses that I can't pin one out.
Think of habit. Think of sort of you get up and you brush your teeth, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, like ritual.
It was a religio, was the rituals that people did on a daily life that were sponsored and sanctioned by the Roman state. And its purpose was to appease the gods. It was official rituals, official habits, which is a very different idea than we have a religion today, where it's like a vocation, a deeply held faith, a thing like that. The Romans saw it as just something that you did because you had to keep Jupiter on side so he gives you nice things, it doesn't try and screw you over.
Mm.
In fact, it had such a firm idea of these habits and stuff that they separated it from superstitio, or superstition, which is exactly the same thing as religio, except not sanctioned by the state. So you could almost define them as good habits versus bad habits. They were just habits relating to the gods.
Yeah, that's interesting. That meaning of the word still underpins it today, I think. Interesting. Makes sense.
So religion is something we've recently come up with. It's something that we've decided now that we want to define separately from other parts of life, other habits and rituals that we do, like going to the shop or whatever. It was just, originally, it was just rituals in relation to the gods, as shopping was in relation to how much food you've got in your cupboard. So, if you were to ask a normal person, usually, what the heck is religion? What you're going to get is something like, something to do with supernatural beings.
Mm.
Do you agree with that? Do you think we could start defining religion as a belief in supernatural beings?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't believe that you necessarily have to have supernatural beings to define something as religion. I think it's just moreover this sense of some kind of universal guidance. For the lack of a better definition. And I think that supernatural beings is something that it very easily converges into, and it's very closely related. But I don't think that you have to have supernatural beings per se to have a religion.
There's always ongoing debates in Buddhism about how many, if they believe in real supernatural beings or not.
Indeed.
In fact, you'll find in these debates, Buddhism always comes up as a sort of a standout, where it's just like a lot of the things you think are religion, it's just like, yeah, we're not doing that. But most of the time, it is true. Most of the time, religions have some sort of supernatural beings.
Yeah, not debating that, absolutely.
It's simplistic, and it's a wee bit too stripped down for my liking. So we are going to go with the granddaddy of modern religious studies, Neil Durkheim, if I pronounced that rightly. He said this: "A religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. That is to say, things set apart and forbidden. Beliefs and practices which unite in one single moral community called a church, to all those who adhere to them."
Yeah.
Effectively, he was really putting the emphasis on religion as a mode of society, something society uses to build itself and hold itself together. And it functions as a way of making moral rules that everyone agrees on. And if everyone agrees on them, the society then has a system on which to base itself. And if you've got moral systems, that is a base for a political system, which is then a base for a ruling elite. And that's kind of what he had in mind. Of course, you can tell by the words he used, he had a very strict Western bias. Like, for example, the concept of a church is a Western idea.
Yeah.
Ecclesia, a gathering of people, is what a church means. While, again, we have Buddhism, which, in some manners of Buddhism, you go off and live by yourself, and you meditate all by yourself, or you even mummify yourself, and you like commit suicide and all sorts of anti-community things. But so that's probably the best definition we've got, but it still has an element of sand creeping out of your fingers. And that's not a problem we're going to solve today. This blurriness is something we're going to have to deal with, because religion seems to be blurry. And just like in real life, we have to deal with some of the weird beliefs we have to do. We have to literally come to terms with the fact that belief is weird. Now, what do you think is the strangest belief you've ever heard of?
Ooh, the strangest belief I ever heard of. I think that's things you find on conspiracy forums on the internet.
But specifically for religion, strangest religious belief. Yes, we know conspiracy theories are a type of sort of baby religion, but stick for establishment religions, mainstream.
There are so many weird things about mainstream religion that I honestly don't even know where to start or what to bring up.
Well, I think a good example would be the banal ones. So like Judaism and Islam don't eat pork.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
It's just another arbitrary animal which arbitrarily evolved. They're not poisonous. You can eat pork and not die.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, and I might be wrong here, doesn't it have to do with the impression that pigs are dirty in some way?
Yeah, it has, but there's all sorts of different excuses.
By the way, not true. Pigs are one of the cleanest animals around.
You'll find lots of opinions of religious scholars and religious people as to why they have these rules. You almost find a different opinion for every single person.
And the fact that they have to question why they have these rules kind of underpins how pointless it is.
Arbitrary.
Yeah. Arbitrary is the word I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm. So, we've discovered now that religion has some common characteristics, but they've got blurry edges. So, we've got things like belief in supernatural beings. So, we've got like Jesus, Allah, Hindu gods of various things. They've got the kami in Japanese religion. You get the idea.
Mm.
Then you have a distinction between sacred and profane, which is something I find fascinating personally, is this idea that some things are inherently good and special, and other things are inherently sort of either bad or just non-good.
Mm.
So, for example, imagine a chalice versus a cup type thing. A chalice has gravitas and it could be more sacred. In fact, Catholic priests use chalices, to serve the wine during communion.
Mm.
They wouldn't come up with one of those novelty cups where it's like, I love London or something written on it. That's a profane cup.
Yeah.
I like to bring up the contradiction here, though, was because Jesus would have drank from a wooden common cup. He would have drank from a very profane cup, but it just shows the importance of sacredness in religion, that they can literally choose something that did not emulate their God character just to look more sacred.
Indeed. It's like a way to bring how we see something as sacred is something that's very, I guess, introverted in sensation. So that's like a way to put it out into external world and put special value on some objects.
Well, sacredness and profanity are just arbitrary. Like they're just saying this is sacred and this isn't. Why? Because we bloody said so. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah, I'm just getting more into the psychology of it, I think. But yeah,
the sacred and profane can also be broken down into acts or actual physical things that you do, not just objects or people. For example, it is profane to have sex before marriage in a lot of religions, but it is sacred to have sex and have children after marriage. So there is nothing like innately sacred about sex. It's really context-based. So the division between sacred and profane can be a little bit blurry as well. Well, it also reminds me of sacred things you can do that aren't officially related to religion, like it's sacred to like fly the US flag if you're American, and it's profane to burn it. What do you think?
That's such a weird thing to me. The flag obsession.
Do you have anything sacred in Sweden? Something it's considered really special?
I mean, we most definitely do, but I honestly can't think of a specific example. I don't think there's anything that compares to like flag burning. There's nothing that such a sin in that sense, unless it's obvious, like don't hurt people, you know.
Think back to our first episode.
Mm.
What is it? It's sacred when, for example, you're dealing with your monarch. The rituals around them, there's a sacredness to the monarchy. And the working class, the commoner, is profane as opposed to sacred. And that's one of the ways that they justify their own existence, and they justify their own power.
Mm.
So sacredness and profanity sort of runs through nearly every religion. Even Buddhism has things that are sacred. For example, some Buddhist sects believe you should be vegetarian, in that eating meat is profane, but eating just vegetables is sacred. Now, perhaps the most important feature of religion is moral codes sanctioned from some supernatural source. Basically, the concept of right and wrong, what you should and shouldn't do, coming from somewhere on high. Now, I'm imagining this is still a part of religion that's very strong in your culture, where literally the norms and morals set out in religion are still the norms and morals in your society, even without religion.
Right, that was what I was saying.
Can you think of it, is there a taboo against premarital sex in Sweden? I imagine there's not quite one among younger people, because that's generally all over the world.
No, there isn't. But you know, we in the West we have this general attitude towards sex that comes from Christianity, that it's like, it's dirty and it's bad, it's sinful, and even if you don't personally believe that, it's an attitude that still lives on in the most subtle of ways. It's there if you try to as soon as you start looking for it, you see it everywhere.
Yeah, it's really pervasive, and it makes up the moral skeleton, kind of makes up the backbone of your societal mores and your habits.
Yeah, it's very, very deep, very deep.
That's the scariest bit. It's one of those categories where it's like, this is so pervasive, no one ever thinks about it. It's beyond thinking. It's just there.
Right.
I always thought of things like that, like a blanket that's like smothering you. You can't escape from it because it's just all over you. It's your existence, and it's like crushing down on you and boxing you into this moral framework that you may not willingly sign up to, or even you may not even realize there's an option not to sign up to it.
I think that's the worst part. I think that's definitely the worst part. Even if your values don't line up to it, it takes a lot of self-insight to actually see how this attitude still lives on in you. Even if you try to fight it, it sits so deep. It takes work to really wash it off.
So, now that we've defined religion, I suggest that we dispose of that definition in the trash can. And we make our own. What do we, as meritocrats, mean by religion? Meaning, what part of religion is important for us to criticize? So, we are going to define mainstream religion. And I suggest you can feed back to me on this, but here's my suggestion. I suggest that mainstream religion is a social construction based on faith, that being beliefs held without reason.
Yeah.
Do you think that's useful as a definition?
I think that's useful. I would also like to add that my view of mainstream religion and what underpins my issue with religion at its core is that it's a self-degradation of a strange sort. This is something you find in all mainstream religions. Like you are not worthy, not compared to God or not compared to enlightened being. It's you push yourself down, you undervalue yourself. It's kind of at the core of the whole point of it.
You mean the social stratification that's implied by religion?
Yeah.
Which I suppose you could think of it like as the what do you call it? The caste system in Hinduism, where literally you're born crap or you're born awesome.
It's essentially just submission. It's submission. You submit to something. You submit to a master that you can't even see. It's
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a common symptom of religion, but it's not a definition.
Oh no, I wasn't necessarily saying it's a definition. I was just saying that it's something that underpins all general religion. I think it's something to keep in mind here.
See, I just want to hold on what is religion, because we're not just talking about the Abrahamic religion, religion worth criticizing. And I think the most vital part of that is any belief you hold without having reasoned into that belief is religious.
Yeah, that's accurate. Sorry that I muddled the waters. Yes,
no, you were still very salient points to make. And I think that helps us get around some of the things like, like some religions don't believe in supernatural beings, for example. But some religions can get away without them, but they're considered like really important. So I think the thing that could really bind them together, the working definition I'd be going with, is that if it's a social construction based on faith, and that can be of any sort, faith in karma, faith in fact, you could even say atheism is a faith in that there is no God, because there's no way of directly proving that there is no God. And
like unconditional faith in the scientific system.
Quite so. And so, yeah, that's what we're going to go with. You can disagree with that. It's just a working definition. It's just for the sake of the podcast, so calm yourself. Right. So we're moving on. So these faith-based beliefs affect us, and they affect everything we do. For example, our politics. Let's take a little trip across the pond, which is a strange place for us, to the American government. And their constitution says there is a division between church and state, but we are not fooled. Basically, everything in the Republican Party is religiously motivated. Their view on abortion and who can marry who and the like are all political positions based off faith. And those are political positions that affect other people's daily lives. That will affect whether or not you have a baby for the rest of your life or something. You know what I mean? These things are massively affect people in the real non-faith world.
Yeah.
Do you see that in your politics or anything in Sweden? Is there anything, decisions you think are made because of religious bias?
I mean, this is something I wanted to talk about because there is an interesting phenomena going on here in Sweden, because we have a political party called the Christian Democrats, I guess you would translate it.
Yeah, there's a version of those in nearly every European country, except that, interestingly, the United Kingdom and Ireland do not have a Christian Democrat party. It is a European phenomenon. In fact, the ruling party in Germany are the Christian Democrats. Go on.
All right. They have not been very popular for a really long time because people kind of see them as, okay, what's the point of these? Like, they don't really see the politics in it, but in recent years they gained a lot of popularity, and the reason for that is that they kind of ditched the whole religious angle and just went straight on to conservative values and what's essentially religious values, but they are not coming at it from a religious angle. They're coming at it from like a moral angle. You know, that the whole general conservative, like, marriage is good, the nuclear family, good things. It's like some kind of like we accept it as good and sacred, and they just really like they kind of understood this and hammered into it, and it has gained them a lot of success, and I think that's an interesting phenomenon to consider.
Yeah, it is absolutely, and it's a very good point, and it's relevant in so many different parts of the world that I even consider conservative values as basically dishonest proxies for religious values. They're just taking the religious label away from values that are religious.
Mm-hmm.
And it's entirely dishonest. It's thoroughly dishonest. The Republican Party in America calls them family values and traditional American values. That's just Christianity.
Exactly, and they have toned down the religious angle because they know that it's not a popular thing in Sweden. But they are Christian Democrats. You see, it's very interesting. It really is.
Random tangent, because it just reminded me of something. It's like, there is no such thing as separation from church and state when you're literally just not calling the church bit church. It's astoundingly dishonest. It's just, you come in with your, you profess to people that you're trying to rule them as people, not as based on your religion, and then you present laws based on your religion. It's oppressive as hell. It's like you can't get away from that person's religion because they're the one in government religifying you. They're just not calling it religion. That's just... it means me, I pour a lot of skepticism on the concept of separating religion and politics. And people say, why are you bringing religion into politics? It's like, no, you can't separate them. You just can't. Anyway, we have to take a break. We'll see you in a moment. Thanks for listening to the Freeze Peach podcast.
Check in every Saturday for a brand new episode.
If you like the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. It really helps us in the rankings.
If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon to receive full notifications when new episodes are released, and of course, like the video.
Please consider sponsoring us on Patreon. Due to not being based in the USA, our channel is unfortunately not eligible for advertising revenue on the Anchor network.
A small monthly donation will help us cover our costs. Just visit patreon.com/thefreespeechpodcast. Your contribution is greatly appreciated.
And remember to catch us on social media. We're on Twitter @the2peaches.
On Facebook at facebook.com/thefrozenpeaches.
And on Instagram at instagram.com/thefreespeechpodcast.
And back to the show.
We want to make it clear, everybody. We're not just disliking Judaism, Christianity, and Islam specifically, because we're going to talk about them a lot. Those are merely the religions that we're most familiar with. But any religion that bases itself on faith, a meritocrat must condemn, because they do not advocate reason. They do not make you act in a way which is reasonable. And for a meritocratic society to work, everyone must act in the most optimally rational way possible. And therefore, religion for us becomes a problem. Now, so everyone feels rightly and evenly criticized. We're going to take a look under the hood of religion, and we're going to see the different types of religion. So you can all feel equally scorned and despised by us, all right? So, give me the simplest type of religion, Christina. What do you think it is? The simplest possible.
Worship.
What's the most simple type of belief you could have that we could consider religious?
Belief in God?
No, even simpler. It's called animism. The idea that all things are full of gods. The idea that everything has a spirit inside it. Coming from an Irish background, I have a sort of a historical fondness for the idea, because the Celtic religion was likely very animistic, especially in its early forms, where they sort of had this idea that fairies lived in everything. And there are superstitions that live to this day. For example, you're not allowed to walk in the center of certain mushrooms or touch certain trees because you're literally going to upset the home of a fairy. The fairy, of course, is the soul of the thing. And in animism, everything has a soul. In a way, it's almost easy to see the attraction to such a belief, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, I am very attracted to it. Not like I personally believe in it, but the whole phenomena is so fascinating to me.
What do you like about it?
I mean, I just said why I find it appealing. For me, it's appealing that it's interesting that humans have a tendency to create these beliefs.
Yeah, humans have a need to make some beliefs, but I find animism like an attractive idea because it sacredizes everything. It makes everything a little bit more sacred than it actually is.
Oh yeah,
so,
it creates magic.
For example, you're going to be less inclined to cut down a tree if you think that tree is in some way alive and sacred.
I mean, trees are alive.
But you know what I mean? Especially alive. They have a soul. Yeah. There is significance, while in the atheistic world, life is defined a little less, interestingly. And so when you cut down a tree, it's like cutting down a type of person. It has the moral gravitas of that.
When you frame it like that, I would be indeed hesitant to cut down a tree because I do consider that a tree has a soul. And I would be like, no, sorry, I don't want to hurt you.
The second one is something I'm not very familiar with because it's not something I think that has been very deep in Western culture, but in Africa or other parts are very important. Totemism, which is the idea that humans have a spiritual connection with some sort of divine being. There are certain...
That was I was alluding to when I just said worship. I was thinking of that.
That's totemism. And the closest thing I can think of in Western tradition is the idea of a Viking berserker, where they thought they could like develop a spiritual connection with the bear or the wolf and then like embody their aggression for a time. That's the closest I can think of in Western tradition, but it's very big in tribal societies. I'm assuming, like, for example, Native American societies have a lot of totemism. So I'm a bit information light on that. It's just not a tradition I grew up in, but it's effectively this idea that you could have in some way a special innate bond with, I don't know, say the god of bears or something, or things like that. Of course, next one is something we're very familiar with. Polytheism, that of many gods. For me, what I love about polytheism is that it gets rid of the need for the god to be perfect. And like, they could all be really kind of trashy and horrible. And well, who's your favorite god?
Ooh, my favorite god. I have a thing for death gods. I like Anubis and Hades a lot.
Why is that?
I have considered this a lot, and if I'm going to explain it, I think I'm going to delve into kind of deep psychological theory here. But I think it has to do with, for me, they symbolize the subconscious and meeting your own darkness.
In general, polytheism sort of breaks down the different traits that humans have and represents them. So, for example, goddesses of love literally represent the tendency of human beings to love. And the main personality traits that love gods tend to have tend to reflect the way humans behave when they're in love. They are effectively, I would call them like story mirrors of who we are. And we use these mythologies of the gods to sort of make a grander, more sacred version of ourselves.
Indeed. Story mirrors is a very good way to define it.
Of course, if you ever read Greek mythology or the poetic Eddas for Norse mythology, you'll find that they're all very human, just with superpowers.
Yeah, I read a lot of Norse mythology, and indeed, they are deeply flawed, and that's what makes them so relatable.
Interesting to me is the way they conceived of worship is very different the way that like modern Christianity conceives of worship. You kind of had this idea that you didn't have to be good or bad. You simply either had the favor of the gods or you didn't have the favor of the gods. And you had this strange position, for example, you could have the favor of one god and the displeasure of another. Or if you've displeased one, you could go to another for help against the one that didn't like you. You could effectively like try your best to play politics with the gods because they're bored. They're up in like Mount Olympus and they look down on humans and they're like, oh, playthings. And basically, if you can get them on your side, they can give you advantages or disadvantages for you to succeed in your life. It's an incredibly different way of worshipping than modern monotheism. And do you think that's better or worse than what we have now?
I think that's way superior. I really do.
Why?
Because it's I see it as a way to manifest what you bring the subconscious into consciousness, or bring forth different sides of yourself and manifest yourself through the lens of these gods. It's just a way to simplify the process of, evolving as a person.
Politically, do you think it's better or worse?
Politically.
I would suggest this. Whenever two societies meet, if you have one god that is the perfect divine and all thing that everyone should worship, versus you have many gods and they're open to the idea of multiple gods, those two societies are more likely to get along if they agree that there is more than one god, because they start to see sort of equivalence in the other person's religion.
Indeed.
And they will often adopt the foreign gods into their own. Like Roman religion was effectively a free-for-all. They were like looking for gods and they were adding them on like nothing normal, because in their eyes, all they saw was more chance to appease another god and more chance that new god will help you. And it was much more able to create a tolerant society than one almighty god which cannot be replaced or objected to in any way whatsoever. So you have this strange, like, look at the Roman Empire and all the societies it brought in. It saw equivalence in other societies it took, and it didn't feel the need to extinguish those religions because it just saw them as other names for their own gods. Of course, the obvious exception was Judaism, which only had one god and refused to let any other gods be worshipped in the temple. And this was very offensive to the Romans, who eventually destroyed the temple. And so there was like, they literally saw this intolerance as it happened. Polytheism is generally much, much, much more tolerant than monotheism.
Yeah, inherently so.
Speaking of which, on to monotheism. Why do we think it's terrible?
Yeah, I mean, you just touched upon it very effectively. There are a lot of reasons. What I was talking about, the self-submission angle is something that...
Well, let's have a look at what a one god is. It's you're putting one being. Let's not go into the Trinity yet. That'll muddy the waters for one being for sure. But let's just take one being. In fact, the better example is the Muslim conception of God, Allah. He is the perfect unity, the one, the origin, and he is very much defined as one without any of the baggage. And he has ultimate power over everything. He created everything, owns everything, and knows everything. He's omnipotent and omniscient, all-powerful and all-knowing. Polytheistic gods were neither all-powerful and all-knowing. They were more powerful and more knowing, but they weren't all. And as a result, with monotheism, you have such a literally monolithic, unbending conception of the world, because everything has to go through this one being and the thoughts of this one being. So it leaves no room for debate, no room for blurriness. It is just the one. And the logical result of that is rigidity. where monotheistic religions tend to be very rigid about who and who is not saved, what is and what is not sacred. And they tend to be very doctrinal. They tend, like the Catholic Church even, is the most evolved doctrine of all of them. A monotheistic God is effectively a cosmic dictator, a cosmic monarch, and he has to be referred to for everything. And there can be no debate with the dictator.
Yeah.
Now, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I'm just trying to get rid of the bad taste in my mouth from just even thinking about it.
On to the opposite. Atheism. Now, I put this down as a type of religion purposely to be controversial because atheists deserve to be upset too. They do not believe in a God. Now, what I find fascinating is that religious people always conceive of atheism as a religion. And even atheists tend to consider themselves a thing, but they're not. They're an incredibly unrelated thing. Like you got right-wing atheists and left-wing atheists and they've nothing in common. But like the religious person will tend to see them as being in common. Like they'll say things like the atheist agenda and things like that, where it's like, it's kind of like Antifa. They aren't a real organization. It's literally a non-belief in a God. But that does not say what else they believe in or not believe in. So in a weird way, if you just say someone's an atheist, that doesn't mean, even if you're an atheist, that doesn't mean you're going to agree with them on very much at all.
Indeed.
Now, to my least favorite one, agnosticism. Not knowing if God exists, or not knowing what he, she, or they is or are. I can't stand agnosticism because I can't stand indecision. I can't stand people that are like fence sitting, that they can't pick a side and go to
Indeed,
it.
I think most people think that agnosticism is like the superior choice because like, oh, we're not picking a side, I'm open to every possibility. But you see, people, we do not see the merit in not picking a side. That's dishonest to yourself. Just be honest and say what you believe in.
You can't
Fucking
even...
coward.
But you can't even not pick a side because, as we discussed earlier, religion and its impact is all pervasive in society. You can't just absent yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's like being keep politics out of this and that. How do you propose we will do that? It's always there, and you have to pick a side, even if you do not dare to say it. I truly do believe that agnostics do inherently know what side they are on. They just don't want to offend or just don't want to appear mean. Or, it's I think it's a very cowardly position to have.
It's like the religious version of being an enlightened centrist. It's like, I have no opinion and strongly either way.
Exactly.
It's usually a stage people go through. Agnosticism is not usually a place where people stay. It's usually a place where they go through either becoming religious or becoming non-religious.
Oh, I think a lot of Swedes kind of believe that they are stayed on agnosticism, but I think agnosticism for a lot of people is like synonymous with just respecting religion without having to be religious yourself. But if that's the case, then just say so.
Interesting thing about that, that's like an awareness. So for example, if you're not religious, but you're aware of religion, you're trying to maintain the sacred things of that religion by not causing offense. You're trying to like protect the sacredness.
Indeed.
But why should you protect it if it's nothing to do with you, is my question.
As I said, I think for a lot of people it's synonymous with not wanting to offend anyone.
I also think a lot of people who are agnostic have commitment issues. If they're agnostic, you'll probably find they also have trouble making decisions elsewhere.
Or just need to be liked by everyone.
Yeah, they're people pleasers. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not willing to rock that boat.
Yeah, that's my view of agnostics, is people pleasers. Look, not that there's anything inherently wrong with pleasing people. I mean, that's nice and all, but it's at a certain point you have to be honest with yourself.
All righty, then let us move on to forms of religion. Christina, are you any familiar with the process of coming up with religious doctrine, the study of religious doctrine?
I don't understand the question.
It's called theology. The
I
idea.
know that it's called theology. Do you mean, am I familiar with it?
Yeah, have you ever read any books about it or read about any theologians before?
And not more than what I gathered in my philosophy studies.
It's a pile of crap, I assure you. It is like the most well-dressed up and wordy nonsense.
Mm.
And it attempts to bring in philosophy to sort of build up a coherent system behind a religion.
Yeah, that's my point. A lot of theology and
It's a very lispy subject.
My English is dwindling. A lot of those people have managed to find their way into philosophy studies.
It's the biggest theology has to be the Catholic theology. It's massive in scope, and it's largely built off of the philosophy of Aristotle. But theology, I must stress, only kind of reaches this philosophical stage at a point in a religion's development. There is a big point at which it is vague. You sort of have a lesser defined idea of what you believe in. And these small groups come up with a theology and they usually form a cult. I'm using the word cult not in the sense you're thinking, I mean in the sense of a new religion. They will have a fledgling theology, which they will apply and share that with a small group. Now, a cult will then develop into a religion eventually. But I suppose the mainstream religions evolved from simple forms as well. And they typically came from sort of a folk religions. Have you ever heard of folk religions before?
A folk religion? Are you talking about paganism, or what are you talking about?
They're even less defined than paganism. They almost have no official doctrine at all. They're more practice than belief. We often hear Chinese folk religion, for example. Lots of things like medicine men and magic and shamans and things like that. And they really are on the sort of light end of theology.
Yeah, those things are interesting because it's kind of like somehow accepted as self-evident. It's fascinating how...
It's interesting to me is that people tend to concede that religions have been the same forever. It couldn't be any more different. From either a small cult or from a folk religion of some description, the religion started off very vague and almost like mist, and then it condensed and became more formalized, and a theology became more philosophical, and it became more of a tangible thing, and it changed very, very much over time.
More dictatorial, a doctrine, a law.
It's just it became more from what random traditions were saying that could change every generation because nothing was written down, nothing was set in stone, to something like a church, which had an official doctrine that taught that doctrine and maintained that doctrine. And people tend to conceive of religions as unchanging. That's nonsense. Religions themselves, when they fully developed, can be highly institutionalized and regulated by doctrine, or they can be sort of anarchic. The Catholic Church is incredibly institutionalized. You have exact positions laid out in the priesthood, for example, which fascinatingly are based off of the political structure of the Roman Empire, which most people don't know. It's like the idea that the Pope was effectively conceived of as the emperor. And the cardinals were conceived of, the governors below him, and sort of things like that. In fact, you have ever heard of like a Catholic diocese?
No.
Well, it's probably you're not used to the familiar English word, but it's like
I think that's.
There's like a diocese, which is like a province, and in those dioceses there are parishes, and bishops are in charge of the diocese, and there's parish priests in charge of the parishes. That's all effectively based off the Roman Empire, literally their political structure, the government, effectively. But on the other hand, you've got something like the Japanese religion, which has no governing sort of power at all. It's nearly all ritualized.
The most popular religion in Japan at the moment is Christianity. Just so you're aware of that.
Well, like in Kami, you went to the temples, which is sometimes called temple Shintoism, and there's no real thing you have to believe. It's more about the rituals you conduct around the temples. In fact, you can believe it's all nonsense and still conduct Shinto.
Yeah, Shinto is like a more evolved but also vaguer form of animism in a way.
It is.
Interesting.
Our point here, it's like the opposite of Catholicism. It's like super doctrinal, super institutionalized, to nearly the extreme opposite, where beliefs themselves, they don't even bother to define them. As long as you do a couple of rituals around kami statues, you don't even have to believe the kami are real.
Yeah.
Like,
I find Shintoism fascinating, as a subject of study. It's interesting to me.
Religions also have a tendency to shatter like glass whenever they reach a certain level of development. Whenever you get a religion and a lot of people are involved in it and it reaches a certain level of growth, it's near guaranteed to shatter into different sects.
Yep.
And estimate the number of sects in the 3 Abrahamic religions. Abrahamic religions, we mean, are those religions who see the character Abraham as their patriarch. So, for example, with Judaism, you have a division between Orthodox, Reform, and Conservative Judaism. In Christianity, it's mostly Catholic and Protestant, but there are an estimate 45,000 sects of Christianity. Like, holy shit ahoy. That is just gigantomenormous. 45,000. Islam is mostly Sunni and Shia tends to split up. I think there was something like 16 or 17 estimated varieties of Shia. But nothing seems to come close to Christianity in its sectarian orgy that it seems to have engaged in.
Right, I wonder what the cause of that is. Because Christianity is so widespread, or is there something else that...
Well, usually when you get a large amount of people together in a group, it's like... eventually you're going to have disagreements because there's only a certain amount of people that can feel bound to each other.
So basically because it's so widespread.
Yeah, exactly. It grows beyond its ability to sustain itself and it shatters. I have no doubt we will do podcast episodes in the future about examples of this. For example, the Catholic and the Orthodox Church, for example, is a fascinating topic. But we've got to trot on, I'm afraid.
I'm just going to point out, this is really a bit of a funny fact about my family, is that they couldn't really decide if they wanted to be Catholic or Protestant, so they kind of switch it up. Half the family is Catholic, the other half is Protestant, just for the sake of it. It's weird. Don't question it.
That just sounds like the history of Germany. Half of them are Protestant, half are Catholic, and there's like, if you look at the map, they all like match different little parts of the Holy Roman Emperor, little
but
fiefdoms.
It's so totally without any actual point to it. I mean, like, I'm Catholic, my cousin is Protestant, but it's... Yeah, it's like we don't want to take a side, let's just do both of them.
Let's finish off with some facts.
Yeah.
31.2% of the world are Christian, 24.1% are Muslim, 16% are irreligious, 15.1% are Hindus, 6.9% are Buddhist, 5.7% are folk religions, 0.8% are other religions, and 0.2% are Jews, according to Pew Research. If we add all of that up and take away the percentage of atheists and agnostics, you can estimate that 85% of all human beings alive today are in some way religious. 85 of them.
Yeah.
That's a disturbing number.
It is, and it comes as no surprise to anyone, I hope.
So when you have that many people who base their worldview on some sort of faith, we are stuck in a place where the world is stuck in a conservative mindset, where religion continues to act as a tool of repression. That we continue to have narratives for entrenched power structures. And
I think it's just that we accept narratives as a valid reason to guide us, to determine what we do and what we believe in.
We will leave this topic now with a last idea for you to think about. I'm not going to provide a definitive answer, but I'm going to ask you to think about it. Is there such thing as an ideal religion? A religion we might actually want? Here's my suggestion. Our religion must be based on the truth. So, for example, you could have a theology conceived of that everything is connected, because we genuinely live in a world where we live in an ecosystem and all things that are alive affect each other, and that our existence is contextualized in the existence of other living creatures.
Mm. But you do realize the problem in saying a thing like this, that religion must be based on truth, because people that are religion do believe that their religion is based on truth, and then we have other people who say that truth is subjective, which is the stupidest thing you can say. But just
indeed.
Saying it's
you would
difficult.
You would indeed have to have an agreed conception of what truth is, and meritocracy, of course, is addressing that issue. Secondly, I think it must be open to change. Furthermore, it must not arbitrarily condemn people for not being a part of it.
Yes.
It must be psychologically optimized. It must be inspiring and a place for an epiphany.
Indeed.
Do you have any ideas?
No, not like this. I'm just saying, I just wanted to say that every system that we accept, every system that we agree are, give power to guide us and define us, it must be open to change. That's like the most important thing.
I absolutely agree.
Cannot stress it enough. And that's not really something that we have at the moment.
Absolutely. That's correct entirely. So, I leave it to you, audience. Consider, is there such thing as an ideal religion? Could it be possible? I don't know. Have a think about it. Until then, thank you for watching. Stay with us after the break, where we will respond to idiots on the internet. See you in a bit. The internet is a terrible place, and it is filled with terrible people. And we are going to respond to some of their verbal diarrhea, which has stained the pure body of the internet.
Okay, right away I have a few questions. What pure body are you talking about?
The average wait time to vote after 7 p.m. in Georgia was 8 times longer at polling stations that were 90% non-white versus 90% white. Some polling places had 8+ hour lines, overwhelmingly at black precincts. Now, a law has come in that forbids you to give food or water to these people waiting in long lines, those people being overwhelmingly black. Yes, it's racist.
What is the justification for that law?
Well, the Republican Party have come to realize that they cannot win a popular election without rigging it effectively because there are too many minorities, too many people that don't vote for them in the minority parts. So they've started, it's a long tradition now of restricting the vote in black controlled areas. And they're afraid they will never win an election again if they don't further restrict the laws. So they're starting to limit the amount of polling stations in states like Georgia. So black people have to travel further while they're not limiting the amount in white places.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm wondering, how do they justify it? How do they frame it? What is the reason for that? They can't just say, yeah, we are putting this law into order because we don't want black people to vote. How do they...
That's the brazen bit. They sort of say something like, it's to do with preventing voter fraud, and they don't say much else. But they really just don't say anything anymore. And this is what it's been really interesting to watch is some of them have openly admitted, oh, we're doing this because we want to get more people voting for us.
I have so many questions. Oh, but my that's the point. Satan.
But they just blatantly do it because they know, and they're open about it these days, black people and ethnic minorities don't vote Republican, so let's make sure that as little of them as possible vote.
Oh my... Sorry, I'm just totally flabbergasted over here.
Yeah, it's racist.
Yeah. No. Wow.
Yep, and so they've done the point where if you're waiting like, what I'd say it was like 8 times longer. So it can be some polling places had 8 or more hours in line to vote. I compare that to where I am. I don't vote personally, but my mum does. It takes it takes about 30 seconds. You go in where there's no line and you leave. It's something you do on the way to the shop.
Yeah, interesting.
But imagine standing there for 8+ hours. And this is in states where the sun is beating down on you. This is hot parts of the world. And they're forbidding people. You could go to jail if you sell them some snacks or water.
That's crazy. And crazy doesn't even begin to describe it.
It's racist.
Yeah.
All right. Next example of disgusting diarrhea. The BBC News report. Body camera footage has shown US police officers handcuffing and screaming at a 5-year-old boy who walked away from school. The video, released on Friday by police in Maryland, shows the 2 officers telling the boy's mother that she should beat him. Later, the child's mother arrives at the school, and the video shows both officers encouraging her to hit her son. "We want you to beat him," one officer tells her. The mother responds that she would be worried about being sent to prison, but an officer responds, "You don't go to prison for beating your child."
What? Wait, what? Not that it matters, but what did the boy do to make the officer so angry? Not that it matters, okay? There's no way to justify it, but I'm just curious.
You know, when you're young, funny thing is, I did exactly the same thing as a child. He just started school and he started crying and he ran out and said, "I don't want to be here."
So he's scared. So they solved the problem by making him even more scared. That's about the parenting I got as a child. But wow.
Yeah, it comes from this conservative idea in South America that parenting is about strict discipline. And it's a very Protestant method of raising children. And what you're effectively doing is traumatizing children. And
you know what I really, really, really have a strong urge to traumatize those police officers. That this makes me so mad.
Get this is not even the end of it. They sat him down, right? And they brought out a pair of handcuffs. And they showed it to him. And they were like, if you keep this up, this is going to be your future. This is going to be what you're going to end up with. You keep behaving like this, you're going to be seeing a whole lot more of these handcuffs.
The poor kid. What?
There is a very strong belief in authoritarian parenthood in the deep south of America. There's a very strong belief in corporal punishment, traditional punishment, sort of the carrot and stick type thing that, get the rod and beat the child. It's a very widely held belief.
Yeah, I know. It's a very widely held belief in Europe as well. Just want to put it out there, it is very, 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 very much forbidden to hit a child in Sweden. I think I think he was French, some politician guy who came over here and was being rough to his son, and the Swedish law were like, no, you don't do that. And people in other countries were like, dude, Sweden, what the he is allowed to hit his son? And we were like, no, it is very much forbidden, don't hit your kids. We shouldn't even have to say this, but...
Well, you gotta love the people who are like, who are you to tell me how to raise my child? You're oppressing me by making me stop beating my kids.
There's no justifiable... I want to strangle people. You cannot justify beating a child, ever. If you believe otherwise, you are scum, and I want to inflict physical pain on you.
There is a very important part of meritocracy that views children very much as the future. The quality of the child will be the quality of the next generation. If you harm a child and damage them, you are endangering the prospects of all of society. And that cannot be tolerated. You cannot put in danger the possibility that the next generation will excel to its full potential. Doing things like that stymies their potential. And that's disgusting. And you shouldn't get away with that crap. But even more weird, that's different from Europe. American schools have police inside them. We don't have that.
No.
I know. They have police.
We certainly do not.
I don't even know if they have a security guard when I went to school. I think they might have had one after everyone left. But
yeah,
police officers take a part in being in schools and managing school discipline. Even I knew some rebels in school. At the very worst, they got suspended. Never once did a police officer come and threaten them. That's sick behavior. I'm going to leave it there with this message to Americans. You're sick. Sort yourselves out, you psychos.
Yeah, you're messed up. Please, this is unacceptable.
All right, our last example of utter disgust is Amazon forces workers to pee in bottles and defecate in bags. Amazon fires women for taking bathroom breaks, and it propagandizes their workers against joining a union.
What else is new?
This has been an ongoing fight in America. That there's been a tiny town called Bessemer in Alabama, and they were trying to unionize against Amazon. And they've used some incredibly Machiavellian tactics to beat off these unionizers and propagandize them. Because they're in the point where, for example, they get their pay docked if they go off the road to find somewhere to pee. So they pee in bottles or they poo in bags. And they're afraid of spending, even if they're in the warehouse, they're afraid of spending more than 5 minutes going to the bathroom. Otherwise they'll get their pay docked. What sort of sick weirdos are these ghouls?
I don't know. I'm just thinking me and my partner have expressed wonder over how comes that no one that if we ever had the privilege of meeting Jeff Bezos, we would probably kill him. And just how come nobody does? It's really I genuinely want to know.
There is currently an ongoing vote about whether or not, among the workers, whether or not they will unionize. It's possible by the time this episode goes out, they will have voted yes or no, but as of recording, we don't know the result, so keep that in mind.
And it almost doesn't matter. The whole just the contrast between this and the fact that the owner of Amazon is the world's richest person. How are we allowing this to stand? How have we not come together and just decided to guillotine that man? Seriously.
Oh dear.
I am actually asking.
When you go in and join Amazon as a worker in America, as part of your training, they will take you in and like show you a video, like a propaganda video about why unions are bad.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And these are people that are like, we're so scared of communists and their propaganda and stuff. It's like, you put up, you're a propaganda central. And just a couple of days ago, it was showing that Amazon had bots on Twitter that were pretending to be Amazon employees to make snarky comments about people doing about unions. And there was also a selection of them that were directly hired to be snarky about unions and basically be class traders and scabs. Yeah, there's always going to be a part of the working class that will betray the working class, the class traders. They will usually do it for money. And there's always going to be a part of the working class that will work for less in order to prevent other people from unionizing.
Indeed. I would like to issue a reminder here. Why do we have weekends? Something that we accept as self-evident. Of course we have weekends. It's because the working class got together. It's a left-wing idea. We wouldn't have weekends if it weren't for left-wing politics. And
of course, America hates workers. It hates everything left-wing. It loves that sort of thing.
That is something that a right-winger who really likes weekends should think about.
Interestingly, Joe Biden has been lauded as like a near hero for having a tepid verbal support of the workers unionizing, which is like, oh, look, he's offered verbal support. And it's like, that's it. But the government in America is so goddamn anti-union. That is effectively like God level support. Because they're so abused by their own government.
Look, in a way, Joe Biden has a really easy job because he just has to be better than Donald Trump to be regarded as a hero, and that's such a low bar.
And it's like, as a get out of jail free card, that is, you could be outright terrible as long as you're not 1% less terrible than Orange Man over there.
Yeah.
And well, so that is all we have for you this week, and I'm sure you can agree the internet is a terrible place.
Humanity is a terrible place. This goddamn forsaken earth is a terrible place. Let me out of here.
But you know what's not terrible? The Free Speech Podcast, and it is every single Saturday if you tune in. Please also consider sponsoring us on Patreon. It's been quite expensive getting all the equipment to make this happen, so if you could give us a few dollars or whatever it is you pay for every now and again, that would be great. And of course, we want to build Christina back up until her noble roots so she can build her palace and lord it over everyone like she's always wanted to. So, head over to patreon.com/the Free Speech Podcast. Do it for Christina. And if we get more than 5 patrons, we might do a little extra just for you. We'll see. Until then, have a great... Until then, with no fetishes being permitted, I am Niall, and this was Christina. This was the Free Speech Podcast, and we will see you again next week.